And just as the final nail in the coffin, which is perhaps a metaphor now that I've said it out loud that's in poor taste, is this piece of the puzzle where we have had, can we pull up the graphic? A significant number of Democrats who have quite literally died in office, a margin that would have prevented the Democrats or enabled the Democrats to block the passage of Biden's big, beautiful budget bill in the House had they stayed alive. Now, remember, DNC Vice Chair David Hogg got an enormous amount of pushback for simply saying he wanted to start a PAC that funded challengers to incumbents, observing accurately that younger members of the party like AOC and people who are outsiders like Bernie Sanders are the ones that have managed to capture whatever energy is left in the husk of the Democratic Party. And for that, Democrat elites have rallied the ranks to literally push him out of his position at the DNC and are frankly using sort of identity politics as a lever to get him out. Even as Democrats are unable to whip sufficient votes to block priorities, precisely because their members are so old and enfeebled that they are quite literally dying in office. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the final nail in the coffin was the perfect turn of phrase. But, what better represents the narcissism and selfishness and moribund nature of the Democrats than the way that they are refusing to resign? Because, again, this gets back to the idea of, the Democrats are constantly fear-mongering. And I want to be clear. I mean, Trump is something to be feared. I mean, he is not he's not an anti-war candidate. He is terrible for many reasons. The Democrats often criticize him for the things that aren't even that bad, which is another irony. But, they fearmonger. They say he's an existential threat. He's a fascist. And yet, if they're so worried about this, why don't they retire so that they have a better chance of having someone from the Democratic Party who can vote against his bill? I mean, literally, his bill passed because Democrats refused to resign despite having being very sick or old. And it reminds me also of the way that if Kamala Harris cared so much about defeating Trump, if this was the most important election ever, then why didn't she listen to the base, which was clamoring for her to depart from Biden on several issues, and most notably on Gaza? We know now that from someone who worked with her, it was because she didn't want to be rude. And it's gauche to depart from your president's policies when you're the running mate. We also know that Joe Biden said, I don't want any daylight between us, kid. And so for Biden, his legacy, much like these Democrats who are dying in office, their legacies are more important than defeating Trump and Trumpism or helping the people that they claim to serve. For Kamala, not, I guess, ruffling feathers was more important, or not upsetting donors, or not being able to run around with Liz Cheney, or not incurring the wrath of AIPAC. So it just belies the whole claim that this is something that is an existential threat. I think that, we are facing existential threats. We're facing existential threats that neither party is willing to deal with, especially when it comes to climate change. But it's very hard, to convince people that you're taking this seriously as an existential threat when you don't do the minimal things needed to either win an election or prevent a Republican from taking your seat in the case of people who are not resigning.
Yeah, it's really hard, frankly, to see in concurrent election cycles the voting population stand up and clearly be clamoring for a legitimate, sincere populism. I mean, the outrage around inflation, cost of living, housing prices, gas prices, food prices, education prices. These are the sectors that are driving inflation and which are causing life to be so precarious for so many Americans. And it's nice now that Democrats are acknowledging that economic precarity, economic anxiety is a real thing, because for, 8 years after the 2015-2016 cycle, they acted, if you said, well, yeah, people voted for Trump because they have economic anxiety, they said that, oh, that's just racism. That's just a synonym for racism. We won't take that argument. So now they're finally embracing it and trying to say, oh, we're going to do a Joe Rogan sort of a situation. But again, they're not backing any of those policies. You're still getting Democrats out here arguing against baseline things like raising the minimum wage, which hasn't been raised since Bush was in office. It's the longest period without a minimum wage raise since it was invented in like the 1930s. And meanwhile, Americans are struggling. So this huge lane is opening up. Meanwhile, on the right side of the aisle, I think people who voted for Donald Trump in good faith, hoping that he was going to follow the sort of Bannon wing of his party and do real economic populism, are seeing that Bannon is engaged in a battle with the other wing of the party that frankly bought the election, the tech wing, the Elon Musks, the Mark Andreessens, the folks who are very openly saying we need to do AI, we need to put the public out of business. We're going to make all of these arguments that legitimize defunding the welfare state that so many Americans, including so many Americans in very low-income red states in the South and elsewhere, are relying upon to survive. And we can do that because we literally bought this election. And I'm afraid that that tech wing, the billionaire wing, who has no alignment of interest with the working class in this country, most of whom are frankly not even American or were relatively recent transplants, are gonna win out. And it's gonna be too late for a genuine populism to actually restore democracy that reflects the people's values. What do you think?
I think it's a justifiable fear. And I think what you're saying, it really does ring true. Again, we've seen in the cases of the leadership of both parties, we've seen a real embrace of anti-populism, right? And one of the most frustrating things was to see people equate Bernie Sanders with Donald Trump, because there's a big difference between actual populism and pseudo-populism, just like there's a big difference between being anti-war and being pseudo-anti-war. And Trump is great at appealing to populist sentiments, but of course he's not someone who cares about the working class, the middle class. He is someone who in some ways is more dangerous than traditional Republicans because he talks a good talk. He knows how to sound like he's a populist. He knows how to sound like he's against the status quo. But of course, in some ways, the most dangerous thing to have is someone who substantively is status quo, but performatively and stylistically is not.
Yeah, it is interesting to see him float things like, we're going to do a tax on the rich, right? But then walk it back. And you can read that in a couple of different ways. You can say Donald Trump is just a bad faith actor he never met in the first place. Or you can read it as, well, he actually is someone who's got a good sense of where the wind is blowing and what the base wants. And maybe he would be happy to do a little bit. He's a billionaire himself. I wouldn't take it too far that he would be willing to do too much redistributive justice to return the hard-working, increased productivity of the working classes back into their pockets the way that it was 50 years ago or so, before a bunch of laws redistributed it to the very top, including Trump's own 2017 tax cut. So I wouldn't take it too far. But there's a way you could read it that says, well, maybe Trump did get a sense that, you need bread and roses. You need to get the masses a little bit to keep them on your team, and that the corporate interests within his own party won't even let him do the bare minimum. And so it's not clear to me how much there is a real war between the Steve Bannons, who seem to be more genuinely committed to working class politics, even if it's also mixed in with sort of a nativism and some other unsavory aspects that I personally don't agree with. And this like the raw, open, we don't need workers anymore. We're going to do AI. We're going to feed you cricket slop and you're going to like it. We don't need humanity. We're going to be on the moon types. And like my concern, I don't know how to read it, but if I had to pick, I would much rather the Steve Bannons of, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I would much rather the Steve Bannon's wing of the Republican Party went out. The problem is the Steve Bannon wing of the Republican Party didn't spend, $500 million electing Donald Trump.
Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.